Chapter 1. The Unexpected Hero. The city of Valtor was a massive labyrinth of gleaming skyscrapers and towering structures, suspended far above the planet's surface. This wasn't Earth. This was Aeon X, a planet once known for its prosperity and scientific advancements, but now marred by a brutal war with a mysterious enemy. The Valtorians, a proud and technologically advanced species, had been pushed to the brink of annihilation. The Queen, their beloved ruler, had fought to preserve her people for decades, but in this final battle, everything had changed. For Dante Reese, an ex-soldier turned freelance mercenary, it was just another job. He was no stranger to danger. He had survived countless encounters with space pirates, rogue robots, and hostile alien species. But this mission, this particular one, was different. He had been hired by a mysterious client who promised a huge sum if he could protect an individual during an important diplomatic event. The payment, while enticing, had been clouded in secrecy. The client's instructions were vague, and the location was classified. The only thing he knew was that he had to protect a woman during an event inside the city's central plaza, a location often used for high-profile meetings and gatherings. The client had insisted that he arrive on time, and that discretion was paramount. He had no idea who this woman was or why she was so important. Dante didn't ask questions. He was a man of action. He was a soldier who followed orders. The night was dark, with the plaza's neon lights casting strange, iridescent reflections off the towering buildings around them. The intense atmosphere made the air feel thick and charged, like a storm was just about to break. His eyes scanned the crowd as he walked toward the plaza. He wore a simple but sturdy armor jacket, his blaster holstered at his side, and a cybernetic implant that kept him alert and aware of any potential threats. He had been briefed on the mission, but his gut told him there was something more beneath the surface. The city had been under constant siege for weeks, and every corner was now filled with hidden dangers, people fighting for resources, enemies lurking in the shadows, and a growing unrest that could erupt at any moment. Dante didn't know it yet, but this mission would be like no other he had ever faced. As he entered the plaza, he could feel the intensity in the air shift. A heavy security presence filled the area, with guards stationed at every corner and military drones hovering above, scanning for potential threats. But it wasn't the security that made him uneasy. It was the feeling of being watched, the sensation that something was about to go horribly wrong. Dante's eyes narrowed as he spotted his target, a woman, standing near the center of the plaza, flanked by several of her personal guards. She was taller than most, with an aura of authority that could be felt from a distance. Her platinum blonde hair cascaded down her back in thick waves, and her emerald green eyes glowed with an inner fire. She wore a striking suit of armor, adorned with intricate patterns and markings that told the story of her royal lineage. The woman stood confidently, her presence radiating power and grace. It was then that the realization hit him like a blast of cold air. This woman wasn't just anyone. This was Queen Aliana, the leader of the Valtorians, the very woman he had been hired to protect. His instincts kicked in, but it was too late. Before he could move, a loud explosion rocked the plaza, sending shockwaves rippling through the crowd. People screamed as chaos erupted around them. The attackers had arrived. Dante's body reacted instinctively, diving forward as a laser beam shot through the air, aimed directly at the Queen. Without thinking, he threw himself in front of her, his body taking the brunt of the hit. The pain was immediate, a sharp, searing sensation in his chest, but he didn't care. He had a job to do. The Queen gasped, her eyes widening in shock as she saw Dante's body hit the ground. The force of the laser strike had knocked him backward, his vision blurring for a split second as he tried to focus. His breathing was heavy, labored, but he could still make out the scene before him. The Queen was unharmed, but the attackers were closing in. There were more laser blasts, more explosions, and screams of terror filling the air. Jonas tried to push himself up, his limbs shaking with the weight of the pain. But it was no use. His body was growing weaker by the second, the wound in his chest burning like fire. "Stay down," the Queen ordered, her voice sharp and commanding. She knelt beside him, her hand brushing over his forehead, her touch unexpectedly gentle. "You're hurt. Let me help you." But Dante Reese, though bleeding, was determined. "No, I'm not done yet." His voice was raspy, barely audible, but he was still conscious, still alive. The queen hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Without warning, she reached into a compartment on her armor and pulled out a small metallic device. She held it to his chest, and within moments, he felt the pain dulling. His wound began to heal, the flesh knitting together as the device's nanites worked to repair the damage. The queen's actions were swift, but every movement spoke of her intelligence, her authority, and her deep knowledge of advanced technology. As the device worked, Dante's head cleared, his breath steadying. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with disbelief. He had just jumped in front of a laser to protect her, not knowing who she was or what kind of power she held. But here she was, healing him, saving him in return. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to be saved by the queen herself. Why? Why did you do that? Dante muttered, his voice thick with pain. Because you saved me. Queen Aliana's eyes met his, filled with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something more personal, perhaps. You're my protector now, soldier. But I also owe you my life. Jonas shook his head, pushing himself up slowly, the pain still there but not as overwhelming. He could see the security forces moving in, pushing back the attackers, but the confusion in the plaza was still palpable. No one else could have done what you did, Aliana continued, her voice steady. You've proven your loyalty to me today. But the truth is, I'm not just a queen. I'm something far more important than that. Jonas looked at her, still confused. What do you mean? The queen took a deep breath. I'm the last of my kind, the last of the Valtorian royal line, and my people are under threat like never before. There are forces at play that I can't even begin to explain, but you've just been thrust into something much larger than you could have imagined. Dante's mind raced, but before he could ask another question, the distant sound of engines reverberated through the plaza. The attackers were still out there, regrouping for their next assault. He could see their ships moving in the sky above. Without hesitation, Aliana stood up, extending a hand to help him to his feet. We need to go. They'll be coming for us again. Dante nodded, pulling himself up, his body still aching from the blast but refusing to collapse. I'm with you, Your Highness. As they made their way toward the escape vehicle, the rest of the security forces took up positions around them. The battle was far from over, and the stakes had just gotten much higher. But for Jonas McCabe, one thing was clear now. He wasn't just a mercenary anymore. He was part of something bigger, something that was going to change his life forever. And it all started with the choice he made to jump in front of the laser. And in doing so, he had just become part of the Queen's destiny. Chapter 2. Unlikely Allegiances. The sound of blaster fire echoed in the distance as the Queen and her protector, Jonas, navigated the tight alleyways and hidden passages beneath the city. Their footsteps were quick, but the weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air. The streets had transformed into a battlefield, neon lights flashing across the cityscape in a chaotic display of colors as distant explosions echoed. The result of the attackers attempting to breach the central government building. Jonas's mind was still trying to piece everything together. Just hours ago, he was a mercenary, doing what he did best, getting paid for a job and walking away. Now, he had thrown himself in front of a laser beam to protect a woman he hadn't known was Queen Aliana, the very last of the Valtorian royal line, and, apparently, the key to something far more significant than any of them realized. Where are we going? Jonas asked, his voice low and strained as he glanced over his shoulder, scanning the alley for any signs of pursuit. Aliana's gaze flickered to the skyline above them, her eyes scanning the rooftops for any signs of enemy movement. Despite the chaos around her, she remained composed, the cool authority of a queen evident in her every movement. But there was a tension behind her eyes, a flicker of something that hinted at the gravity of their situation. We have a safe house in the underhalls, Aliana replied, her voice calm but filled with urgency. It's a relic from a time before the war. It's hidden, secure, and I can trust the people there. But we don't have much time. Jonas nodded, following her lead as they quickly moved through the winding streets. The underhalls were known to be dark, underground districts, often used as places to hide away from the public eye. It wasn't exactly the most glamorous location, but it was secret, a safe haven for those who needed to disappear. And right now, disappearing was exactly what they needed. So, what's really going on here? Jonas asked, keeping his voice low, but the curiosity in his tone was undeniable. I mean, I know you're the queen, but there's something more, isn't there? Why was I targeted? And why would anyone want to kill you? Aliana stopped in her tracks, her head turning slightly as she looked at him. The expression on her face softened. The answer is not simple, Jonas. She paused, then continued. We've been in a cold war for years. The Valtorian kingdom was on the brink of losing everything. Our borders, our technology, and even our identity. There are those who want to exploit the kingdom's downfall for their own gain. But the attackers today, they were part of something more dangerous, an organized revolutionary faction led by a dark power. They want to completely dismantle the Valtorian line and take control of our advanced technologies. Jonas narrowed his eyes. A faction? The wheels in his head started turning. A revolution, an uprising, a shadow faction. Things were becoming clearer, but it didn't add up. Who are they? Why go after you? The last of your people. Aliana's eyes darkened as she glanced around, ensuring they weren't being followed. The faction is known as the Tarn, an organization that has been plotting in the shadows for decades. They've managed to infiltrate key positions within the military, the government, and even my own court. They've been preparing for this day, the day when the Tiburon, the ship that once contained the last remnants of Valtorian power, returns. And with it, they will have access to all the kingdom's secrets. Jonas stopped walking for a moment, his heart skipping a beat. Tiburon? The word was familiar. He'd heard it in passing, a legend among the Valtorians. The Tiburon was a warship, a massive, forgotten artifact, said to hold the last of the Valtorian advanced technology. But the Tiburon hadn't been seen for decades. It was lost, or so everyone thought. The Tiburon is a relic from an older time, yes, but it's not just a ship, Jonas. It is the keystone to our entire history. The Tarn believe that with it, they can control not only our technology, but the very fate of the galaxy itself. Aliana's voice was heavy with the weight of her words. They will stop at nothing to get their hands on it. Jonas didn't know whether to believe her or not. The Tiburon was a myth to most, a ghost ship that had vanished long ago. But Aliana's words were beginning to make sense. If the Tarn knew the Tiburon's secret location, and if they had the ability to manipulate Valtorian technology, it could spell the end for her people, for the galaxy at large. Aliana turned toward Jonas, her face resolute. I didn't bring you into this war by accident, Jonas. You have something I need, your expertise. You're the only one who can help me find the Tiburon. The Tarn won't stop until they've wiped me out and seized the ship. Jonas stood there for a long moment, his mind racing. He had been a mercenary for years, a soldier who fought for whoever paid the most. But this was different. This was bigger than money, bigger than any contract he'd ever signed. Aliana reached into a compartment on her armor and handed him a small data chip. This contains the last known coordinates of the Tiburon. The Tarn are after it, and they will stop at nothing to get their hands on it. I need you to help me. I need you to find the Tiburon before they do. Jonas took the chip, his hand steady despite the weight of the decision ahead. He wasn't a hero, and he had never wanted to be. But something about this woman, the queen who had fought for her people, the last hope of a dying kingdom, struck a chord deep within him. He wasn't sure he could fix this situation, but he couldn't walk away either. You got it, Your Highness. I'll help you find the Tiburon. But don't expect it to be easy. We'll have to move fast, and we'll need to be careful. The Tarn will come after us, and I'm guessing they won't play fair. Aliana nodded, her expression softening for a moment. I know, but we don't have much time. If we fail, everything we know will be lost. Jonas felt the weight of the decision settling in. He had just jumped in front of a laser to protect this woman, not knowing who she truly was. Now, he was about to enter a war not just for her, but for the future of the galaxy. Let's get moving then. We have a lot of ground to cover. And just like that, Jonas McCabe the mercenary became the Queen's protector, the last line of defense against a galactic force that threatened to tear everything apart. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. The underhalls were everything Jonas had expected them to be: dark, dirty, and chaotic. The neon lights from the surface above barely penetrated the subterranean levels, casting strange shadows on the graffiti-streaked walls and decaying buildings. The air smelled of dust and fuel, with the distinct hum of underground machines echoing through the narrow passages. It was the kind of place where people disappeared, where secrets were buried, and where only the brave, or the desperate, dared to venture. Aliana moved with purpose, her steps firm despite the gloom around them. Her armor, though regal, was functional, designed for mobility and protection in situations just like this. She was a queen, yes, but in this part of the galaxy, that meant little. The Tarn had spread their influence here, and the dangers of the underhalls were real. Jonas kept a close eye on their surroundings as they walked. His hand never strayed far from the blaster holstered at his side. The alleyways here were narrow, and the occasional figure lurking in the shadows made him uneasy. But for now, they were moving with purpose, determined to reach the safe house that was supposed to hold the answers they needed. "You know," Jonas said, breaking the silence, "I've been to places like this before, but it's usually after a job goes south. Not like this. Not with a queen walking around like she owns the place." Aliana glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You're not wrong, Jonas. I've never been to the underhalls either, not willingly. But sometimes, you have to go to the darkest places to find what you need. And right now, what I need is information. Information about the Tiburon and its coordinates." Jonas grunted in agreement, his boots scraping against the wet pavement as they continued their journey. "And the Tarn?" he asked. "How far do you think their reach goes?" Aliana's expression darkened. She didn't answer immediately, but when she did, her voice was laced with a quiet urgency. "The Tarn have been here for years. They've infiltrated every level of the Valtorian government. The palace, the military, the militant groups that plague our people. They've spread their influence through lies and manipulation. They've convinced many that the Tiburon is the key to our freedom. But they don't understand what it really is. They think they can control it. They think they can harness its power. But they have no idea what they're really dealing with." Jonas stopped dead in his tracks. A shadow loomed before them, moving quickly but quietly, too quietly to be a simple civilian. His hand immediately went for his blaster, fingers itching to react, but Aliana put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Not yet," she whispered, her voice calm but firm. "Let them come. We need information more than we need a fight." Jonas narrowed his eyes but didn't move, watching the figure as it came closer. As it stepped into the dim light, Jonas recognized the familiar silhouette of a Tarn operative, the dark militant armor, the sleek helmets, and the energy weapons that hummed with the promise of death. The Tarn operative stopped in front of them, his eyes scanning the pair before settling on Aliana. He said nothing at first but stood with the cold, practiced air of someone who was more than used to controlling the situation. Aliana didn't flinch, her gaze locking with his. "What do you want, Tarn?" The operative tilted his head, his expression unreadable behind the mask. "You're the last of your kind, Your Highness. The only thing standing between us and the Tiburon." Jonas tensed, but Aliana's voice remained calm, controlled. "I'm not afraid of you." The operative smirked, and with emotion that was so quick Jonas barely saw it, a blaster appeared in the operative's hand. But before the weapon could be aimed, Aliana's own hand moved faster than Jonas could track, drawing out a small but deadly blade and pointing it directly at the operative's throat. Jonas stared, surprised at her speed, impressed by her calm, but also alarmed. "You don't waste any time, do you?" Aliana didn't take her eyes off the operative. "The Tarn think they can intimidate us, but they've never encountered someone willing to do whatever it takes to protect what's left. You'd be wise to remember that." The operative didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, where a group of armed men appeared from the shadows. More Tarn operatives, dressed in black armor, emerged from the alleyways, their weapons drawn. Jonas instinctively reached for his blaster, but Aliana shook her head. "We don't need to kill them, Jonas." Her voice was low, but there was an underlying threat that was unmistakable. "We need to learn where the Tiburon is, not just fight." The operative's smirk faded, and he looked back at Aliana. "You're bold, Your Highness, but boldness doesn't always win battles. I know you think you have time, but you're wrong. The Tarn are everywhere. We've already infiltrated your palace, your government, and your military. The Tiburon is ours for the taking. And when it is, the galaxy will bow to us. You'll be nothing but a faded memory." Jonas felt a flicker of fear, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. He took a step forward, ready to take action, but Aliana's firm hand on his arm stopped him. "You're right," she said, her voice sharp, confident. "But I'm not done yet, and I will never let you have the Tiburon." The operative took a step back. His eyes lingered on her, filled with both contempt and something more respect. But before he could respond, his communicator beeped. The operative glanced at it quickly, his face changing from confident to cautious. "This isn't over, Your Highness," he said, turning to leave, his hand motioning for his men to follow. "We'll be waiting." Aliana didn't lower her blade until they had disappeared into the shadows. She turned to Jonas, her expression unwavering. "They will come for us. They always do," she said, her voice calm but filled with growing urgency. "But we can't let them win. The Tiburon is the key, Jonas. It holds the answers to everything. We have to find it before they do." Jonas nodded, his heart beating faster. It was clear now, this wasn't just about an ancient ship or an artifact. The Tiburon was a powerful weapon, and the Tarn were only the tip of the iceberg. If they failed, the galaxy itself could fall into chaos. They couldn't afford to lose. "We'll find it, Aliana, and we'll stop them." And so, as the pair ventured deeper into the underhalls, the shadow of the Tarn loomed large. Their enemies were closing in, but Jonas and Aliana were about to take the fight directly to them no matter the cost. Chapter 4. The Tiburon's Secret. The underhalls were darker than ever, and the deeper they ventured, the more the feeling of imminent danger began to settle into Jonas's bones. He had always been a man of action, used to fighting through the chaos and coming out on top. But now, the stakes were higher than they had ever been, and his thoughts were constantly drifting back to the Tiburon. What had once been a myth was now the key to everything, and Aliana, the last of her kind, was the only one who could unlock its secrets. As they moved through the narrow tunnels, Jonas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The walls seemed to close in on them, the quiet murmurs of subversive activity echoing from distant corners. He couldn't trust the underhalls, and he certainly couldn't trust the Tarn, who were never far behind. If they were going to find the Tiburon, they would need to stay one step ahead, and they would need more than luck. "Keep your eyes peeled, Jonas," Aliana said, her voice steady despite the growing tension in the air. "We're close, but this is the Tarn's territory now. They've got eyes everywhere." Jonas nodded, scanning the shadows for any signs of movement. He could feel the sweat starting to bead on his forehead. The closer they got to their goal, the more the air seemed to crackle with danger. He couldn't help but feel like they were walking into a trap. Ahead of them, the passageway opened up to a larger room, its steel door slightly ajar. Inside, hidden beneath layers of scrap and metal debris, lay a massive vault. The room hummed with power, the faint energy of something ancient pulsing beneath the surface. The Tiburon, or rather, its location was inside this vault, and it would take everything they had to crack it open. "This is it, Jonas," Aliana said, her voice low but filled with urgency. "The coordinates we need are in there. The Tarn think they can get to it before we do, but they have no idea what we're up against." Jonas swallowed hard. The pressure was starting to get to him, but he couldn't let it show. "Not now. I'll get us in. But once we do, there's no turning back. You ready for this?" Aliana looked at him, her eyes full of determination. "You have no idea how ready I am. But we need to hurry. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this gets." Jonas moved forward, using his toolkit to bypass the security system on the vault's door. It was ancient, almost like a puzzle from another era, but after several minutes of work, he managed to crack the security codes. The door hissed open, revealing a dark, metallic chamber, bathed in the dim light from flickering overhead panels. Inside the vault were data cores, blueprints, and encrypted storage units. Jonas immediately recognized the Tiburon's blueprint, an ancient, holographic map of the lost warship, still intact despite the years of neglect. The map flickered to life in front of him, projecting detailed schematics of the ship's interior. It was a ship designed for destruction, a weapon more powerful than anything Jonas had ever encountered. "We found it, Jonas." Aliana's voice trembled slightly with excitement. The Tiburon's location. Just as the words left her mouth, the unmistakable sound of boots echoed from the hallway outside. The Tarn were here. They had found them. Jonas turned quickly, pushing the data cores into a secure compartment on his belt. "We need to go." Now. Aliana nodded, drawing her blaster as she moved toward the exit. They can't get to the Tiburon before we do. The two of them ran down the corridor, the sound of pursuing Tarn forces echoing in their wake. Every footstep felt like the beat of a drum, counting down the seconds until the inevitable confrontation. The Queen was in danger, and Jonas had promised to protect her. As they neared the final entrance of the underhalls, the roar of gunfire erupted behind them. Jonas spun around, instinctively reaching for his blaster, but before he could aim, a blinding light filled the room. The Tarn had activated energy disruptors, their weapons causing the air to hum with dangerous, electric static. "Get to cover," Jonas shouted, shoving Aliana behind a steel pillar as several Tarn operatives entered the room, weapons raised and ready. The fight that followed was chaotic and brutal. The Tarn were relentless, but Jonas was faster, more agile than any of them had anticipated. Every move was calculated, every shot carefully aimed. Aliana, despite her royal status, was no stranger to combat. She took down two operatives herself, her quick reflexes and precise aim making her a formidable ally. In the midst of the chaos, Jonas caught a glimpse of the leader of the Tarn, a tall figure wearing an ornate black cloak, face hidden behind a visor. The figure raised a hand, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "You think you can protect her?" The Tarn leader's voice echoed, booming through the air. "You're too late. The Tiburon belongs to us now. You should have stayed out of this, soldier." Jonas didn't hesitate. He took aim at the Tarn leader, firing a single shot that struck the figure square in the chest. The leader staggered, then fell to the ground, the impact of the shot leaving the figure motionless. The remaining Tarn soldiers hesitated, momentarily thrown off balance. Aliana took advantage of the pause, stepping forward and dispatching the remaining operatives with precision and speed. But it was clear they had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Breathing heavily, Jonas wiped the sweat from his brow, looking over at Aliana. "Is it over?" She nodded grimly, her eyes scanning the wreckage of their foes. "For now, but we can't stop here. The Tarn have lost this round, but they won't stop hunting us. We have to move fast, Jonas. The Tiburon is waiting." Jonas nodded, then turned to the holographic map once more, his mind already focused on the next step of their journey. They had found the Tiburon, and now they had to unlock its secrets before the Tarn could. But even more than that, they had to protect the future of the galaxy. "Then let's go," he said firmly. "The Tiburon won't find itself." As they sprinted toward their ship, their mission clear, the weight of their responsibility pressed heavily on their shoulders. This was only the beginning. The battle for the Tiburon had just begun.